I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call They Come in Peace. I'm sure we've all heard of the 1947 UFO crash at Roswell, New Mexico, an event that sparked widespread fascination about the possibility of not just life out there in the universe, but that this life was visiting our planet and, well, crash landing into it. These space aliens, little green men, Martians, whatever they may be, are often portrayed in film to be like Europeans invading the New World. It's a common phenomenon to project those feelings of guilt and fear onto the actions of others, and there are plenty of movies imagining that fate. However, we're taking a look at a certain subgenre of space alien films that portray a more benign visitor, one who is interested in making contact, building bridges, and scratching each other's backs in, around 3,000 years. An Indiana electrician, a single mother, and a variety of others all experience an otherworldly event when each sees mysterious objects in the sky. Each is afflicted with visions of a very earthly monument and are drawn to it in order to witness one of the most magical finales in cinematic history. Richard Dreyfuss and Melinda Dillon star in 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A team of SETI researchers, led by Dr. Ellie Arroway, locate and decipher a coded transmission from the Vega system. Buried within the code are the schematics to build a mysterious machine that may or may not hold the key to humanity's first interstellar experience. Adapted from Carl Sagan's novel of the same name, Jodie Foster stars in Contact from 1997. After 12 extraterrestrial crafts mysteriously appear across the planet, linguistics professor Louise Banks is enlisted by the U.S. government to learn how to communicate with the inhabitants. Racing against time, Banks must decipher the alien message before the world is thrust into a global war. Amy Adams stars in Denis Villeneuve's incredible Arrival from 2016. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
Hey, Dad, do you think there's people on other planets?
I don't know, Sparks. But I guess I'd say if it is just us, it seems like an awful waste of space.
All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me as always is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Doing well. I'm feeling relieved that we're not alone.
Oh.
Not feeling alone right now. After all this, we're not alone.
Thank God, right? It's
because
funny.
It seems like a total waste of space.
Everything going on in the world right now, and all of a sudden the government says UFOs are real and no one really gives a shit. They just kind of shrug it off.
That was news back in the 80s.
Right.
Like now, we've had the X-Files, we've had all these things. Who cares?
Been inundated with too many aliens.
Unless the aliens are going to mean some sort of change, well then,
right.
What's the difference?
Instead of ignoring, which they seem to be doing, or being entertained watching us and flying away.
Right, exactly.
Well, obviously, one of my favorite subjects is what we're talking about today. I've probably been interested in this subject since as long as I can remember. It's great that when big budget movies come out that are about this subject matter, because I think that they either do it really well or they miss completely, and it just doesn't happen.
Although I will say, I feel like there's a little bit of both in one of our movies today. Maybe we'll get to that a little later, but it's definitely one of those, it is kind of a hit or miss. Like a lot of times, if you swing for it and it either connects or it doesn't. And
I think it has to do with the ending. I think these movies are very hard to end, and so we're talking about alien encounters. But this is the more peaceful kind of alien invasion, where the aliens aren't really out to destroy us. We're actually learning to communicate with them, possibly gaining some knowledge from them, either in technology or in knowledge in general. So the films we're talking about today are Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977, Contact from 1997, and The Arrival. Or is it just Arrival from 2016?
The Arrival is the
Charlie Sheen masterpiece.
Charlie Sheen one. There's one that's it's a miss.
There's a miss one, yeah. But that one didn't even have a bad ending. That just had a bad first, second, and third act. It just didn't really take off.
Yeah, exactly. And it was It was like, hey, Independence Day was a successful movie. Let's do that for $2 million and see what we can get.
I'd have much preferred that arrival to be a departure.
Hey, all right. This guy, he's going to be here all night.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least for the next hour or so.
Wait, we're not doing a long one today?
This was great to watch these films because I hadn't seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind in quite a long time. And with all the stuff going on in the world with the UFOs and UAPs becoming an actual thing that's admitted by the government, I thought that this was a great block to talk about, especially Close Encounters. Because I'd just like to get into it real quick. I texted you earlier that, reading through the credits, I saw that J. Allen Hynek is the technical advisor on this film, and I had no idea.
Right.
And he's the guy one of two that ran Project Blue Book in the 40s, which was the original task force made up to, search out what UFOs were. And I mean, at the time, I think they thought that they were all, Russian spy planes or, high altitude spy equipment or whatever it was. But I think we learned quickly that it was probably something beyond that, or at least that's what I hope.
Well, yeah. That's the optimistic reading. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's like, wasn't that something where it was like he was tasked to sort of like look into these things and
debunk them, really?
He was like, oh, well, like 90% of them are just, nonsense, and here's the explanation, and this thing, and this thing, and this thing. But what about that 10%?
He's the one that came up with Venus, swamp gas, mistaking it for the moon, things like that. Mistaking planes for what they are, or cars driving on mountainsides and things like that. He was out there to do that, but there was a small percentage that there were unexplained cases in his file. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that sort of, I think, got the creative juices flowing for Mr. Spielberg. Apparently, from reading a book or something he put out, this guy you were talking about, what's his name?
Alan Hynek. Yeah.
So Hynek, put out a book or something, and then Spielberg got kind of excited about that and was referencing that and wanted to make this while he was suffering on Jaws, and apparently that's how the story goes, that he got this one going.
He wanted to be on a different planet when he was making Jaws, I bet.
Yeah.
That sounded like a very stressful
So much so that he wrote himself into that Richard Dreyfuss character.
Take me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Getting into this movie starts out so strong and it ends so strong. There is some lull in the middle that I find myself, not so much that I'm ignoring it, but I find myself drifting off a bit. It's when Dreyfuss kind of goes through his period of building Devil's Tower.
For me, it's like right when it turns night, when they're on the Devil's Tower itself, and they're kind of like trying to climb to the other side of the ridge to see over, like that sequence for whatever reason always kind of like starts to nod off. I start to nod off at. It just has this like really pumping the brakes on, for me, what was like so engaging. And then of course once they start seeing some of the stuff happening down there, it gets engaging again. And that's that last sequence.
Yes.
In the like the little temporary base or whatever landing strip that they set up.
Yeah.
It's so engaging, it's like it's super long, but you're also like just like totally drawn in with a magnet, and you can't look away, and it feels like it flies by. So you feel like, oh, that's the last minute, the last sequence. Oh, that's only like 10 minutes, right? And no, I mean it's actually like 40 minutes.
Exactly, it's like
super long.
Yeah, the last third of the movie is that whole scene.
Yeah.
I mean, and I forgot how early in the movie, well, not early in the movie, but how early it does pop up, because I do think of that as like the last 5 minutes of the movie. And then when it popped up, I was looking at the time clock, and I'm like, wow, there's still a lot left. And it's
right.
And I think that's because it was that scene, that unnecessary adventure scene of them trying to climb up the side of the mountain. Like, I didn't feel like the two of them needed to do that. Like, I feel like they should have just kind of went with the military once they got taken off of that helicopter with the other the other people that were in the sightings group, or whatever,
like drawn to it.
Mm-hmm, yeah, the psychically connected folks.
Like, what's the Francois Truffaut line? It's like they were drawn here. They deserve to be here more than us, or something like that.
I think they were invited, is what he says.
Oh, they're invited. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the Bob Balaban translation. I got it confused.
I like that Spielberg put Truffaut in this movie, and he's actually a significant role too.
Yeah, for fucking no reason, only to get him to like hang out with one of his idols or whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
It kind of doesn't make sense. He was like, "What's the French guy doing here?" And they kind of bring it up once in a while, but you kind of just don't think about it. It's just like, oh, there's this guy.
But he's got a great opening scene, and I think that it's kind of one after another, like the best of hits of reports that you hear about either a radar operator seeing UFOs, pilots that don't want to disclose that they saw a UFO for fear of losing their position as a pilot, because most of those guys are military men, and they'll be taken out of they might lose rank or anything like that, or be grounded. So there was a big fear of that, and I think that they really portrayed that well, especially with that radar operator scene. I thought that was again, nothing much happens, and it's really, really engaging.
Right. It's kind of the Jaws phenomenon. You're kind of looking at the metadata.
Yeah.
Right. That you're seeing what's on the screen. What's so great about it too is how it builds. It's like there's this huge control room. Everyone's kind of just chattering and having their own conversations, and they're all talking to different, people flying and whatever else was going on. And this one guy keeps having this back and forth. And as that's happening, people start, coming into him and, and gathering around his workstation. And soon the entire place is just hovering over his shoulder as he's, doing this thing. And what's funny is like, he talks so fast. It seems like he may have been one of the real radio control
guy.
I mean,
yeah.
He was like, it sounded like he was an auctioneer. He's like,
Gonna check on that to see if there's coming another. Yeah, exactly. I thought the same thing. I was like, it would probably be the best option for a director just to put somebody like that in that position, because they would, in order to capture the realism, they would just be saying the real thing that they would say.
Exactly. And it's it's not as if they're trying to get him to cry on cue or something.
No, exactly.
It was like, he was just doing his everyday job.
Would you like to report a UFO?
Yeah.
Pilot, would you like to report a UFO? No, I do not.
I don't know what to call this thing.
Aries 31, do you wish to file a report of any kind of it?
I wouldn't know what kind of report to file, Senator.
Aries 31, me neither.
Oh man, that was so great. I liked a lot of the scenes, a lot of the the UFOs in this movie. I feel like they felt a little more conventional than they did in like later stuff that we see, like Arrival, for instance. It seems a little bit more otherworldly, but this one they felt like you could actually fly these things. There were like armatures controlling the lights on each of the designs. And I thought that the effects held up really well.
Yeah. I mean, I also the transfer I was watching was really, really great. I mean,
which version did you watch?
Yeah, I was just about to ask.
The original version they called?
Oh, you watched the theatrical or whatever?
Yeah, it said the original. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I probably saw the movie for the first time, like maybe on TV or something. And if that's the case, I saw what's now known as the special edition.
Okay.
Which is, the movie came out in 1977. Apparently it was really, really rushed. Columbia really wanted to get this space movie out
in 1977.
Yeah. They were really rushed. They didn't want to wait till summer of 78, which is what Spielberg was originally planning, apparently.
His buddy's film.
Yeah, and they rush it out. Supposedly Spielberg felt like he didn't have enough time to kind of hone in and craft the thing the way he wanted it to, and wanted to do it again. And the only way that they would let him recut it is if they shot this other ending, which is in the special edition, quote unquote, which came out in like 1980, I think. And what happens is, like, in the final sequence when he walks into the spaceship, we actually cut to the reverse angle and see him inside the spaceship and see the like inner workings of the spaceship.
Oh, I kind of like the ambiguity of what's in there.
Totally. It's terrible. Like having that that interior shot. And it was something they shot separately to justify doing the recut, like, oh, well, we'll show you a new ending, like type of thing. And what's crazy is, like, so for the longest time, apparently that was the version everyone saw, either on TV or on VHS and Laserdisc. Then in the late 90s, like 98, he recut it again and restored a lot of the stuff that was in the theatrical, and kept a couple of things that added to the special edition, and that thing's been called the director's cut ever since. But I guess luckily, just like with Blade Runner or whatever, like you can watch whichever one you want. And depending on when you saw it as a kid, I'm sure that's the cut that you're going to be drawn to.
That's the one I saw as a kid. The one I watched, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of things that are similar. Like the special edition is pretty terrible, though. Like at one point, that great scene where he's like ripping up the plants from outside and chucking them through the kitchen window.
I'll pay for these.
Yeah. Get away from me. And she pulls up her hair dryer.
Chicken wire.
It's like, well, you're leaving in your robe. What are you, crazy? That scene was cut down to just the kids leaving, and like it didn't show him like gathering all the stuff and like having his like
that's
the
part
last
of that
straw
sets up
moment.
the obsession. Like that's all part of it.
I mean, really, it's kind of like it's like the last straw because like they had that fight the night before, and like he's losing his mind. He's like crying for help, and she's not she's like totally over it. And then in that morning after scene, it's like he's like, oh honey, I'm all better now. He's like taking down his UFO papers. Then he starts to tear apart the model and he gets sucked right back into it. She wakes up like sleeping in the kids' room and like looks out the window and sees him like, wait, hey, I'm sorry, I like she was trying to like make amends. And then he goes out of the control and like throwing shit through the window, and like that's the last straw, right? It's like you kind of needed it. It felt like. Now, to me, it's like you need that if the point of the story is sort of to have it be about his family and what this did to it and how they resolved it. But because the sort of like ending is so hypnotic and magical, you kind of forget that like his story is just completely unresolved. He's like, yeah, fuck it, I'm leaving.
Yeah, he leaves his wife and 3 kids, like,
yeah.
And he just took off in his red jumpsuit and get on the spaceship.
Right,
and I was like,
right.
I thought when you were telling me about the special edition added scenes, I thought there was going to be at least a phone call back to is it Terry Garr? Is that her name?
Terry Garr.
I thought it was going to be a call back to her and be like, hey, I'm going to be gone for a couple months. Yeah. Tell the kids I love them, at least, like.
I'm going to be gone for a few months, which in my time it'll be a few months. In your time, it'll be like
I won't
60
age.
years.
I won't age, but you're going to be old as hell.
I'm going to be like those World War II pilots, like still 18 years old or whatever.
God, how confused must those pilots have been coming back?
I know, he's like, oh, welcome home. Come this way. The guy isn't like shitting his pants, like seeing how different things are.
Exactly. Like all this technology around you from like, and you're coming from the 40s. Like, oh man.
But then again, he was
blown.
inside the mothership, so who knows?
True.
Maybe he saw something that blew
Maybe
his
he's
mind
like,
there.
this is all we've got so far, like in this amount of time.
Where are the flying cars? God damn it!
I thought I'd for sure be putting my car in a suitcase like George Jetson. I love the technology in this, and I love this showing how just ridiculous the military can be. I guess Arrival's very good at this too. It does a great job of setting up just how combative we are and aggressive we can be.
Yeah, or and suspicious.
And,
yeah,
or
it's
untrusting.
I think this is in all 3 of the films. I mean, it's kind of embodied in the James Woods character in Contact, right?
Yeah.
Who's always thinking of like the worst case, most base human instincts will be
terrible
applied
hair
to...
in that movie too. Terrible hair color or something. Yeah.
Continue.
You know what I forgot about? It had been so long. I forgot about that Lance Henriksen is kind of like a featured extra in this movie.
He's just kind of in the background. He doesn't. I don't think maybe he has a few lines, but yeah, he's prominently featured as an extra. Yeah,
probably one of his like earlier roles before it became a known commodity type of thing.
I mean, to think that this is 7 years before Terminator.
Yeah.
So before I really saw Lance Henriksen, I think for the first time was Terminator.
Right, and that period of his career where it's sort of like the James Cameron and
Catherine Bigelow,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When he was in their like sort of stock company,
mm-hmm.
and then became kind of like a known entity at that point.
Not bad for a human.
How crazy was the Melinda Dillon character too? It's like at one point she's like running around in the backyard looking for Barry. This is before Barry gets sucked up to the mothership, but she's looking around for him, and she's kind of chasing around in these woods, and she's like, Barry! And
Like Ralphie, like in the
Exactly.
Christmas Story.
Well, yeah, but she had the exact same like sort of like tone in her voice that Kate
Capshaw
had.
Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom. Andy. It was that same like waver.
That must be the direction.
Yeah, exactly.
I want you to kind of sing it.
Yeah. Can you get between a sing and a whine somewhere in there? Yeah.
Yeah. I thought she was great. I thought the movie,
Yeah.
although Dreyfus was hilarious and great, I thought the movie could have focused on her, and I think that would have been a great conflict of her that her son was taken. Like that's a big, catalyst for her to get going.
While they're sort of driving past all the checkpoints, she gives a quick Cliff Notes summary of like all the things that all the crazy shit she's been through. Like they're like searching around in the bodies, and they didn't find anything, and they told me I'm crazy, and it's like it's like yeah your story, whatever, but it's kind of how it was treated.
Exactly. Wait, we should follow Dreyfus though with the railroad tracks going crazy and
oh man, that sequence is so awesome.
trying to pull the car over
Right.
though, and the thing goes straight up. Such a good scene.
You're in the middle of the road, jackass.
You tell me where cornbread is? Turkey!
That one was awesome, and I like that the sunburn, that like radiation burn, was kind of just on half of his face, and I think that one kid says he looks like a candy bar, like a 50-50 bar, I think he called it.
Exactly. But how hilarious was it that like everyone got sunburned the first time around, but then in the final sequence, no one got sunburned? Or it takes a little while for the sunburn to show up, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's an overnight thing. It really settles in.
I mean, the mothership should have just, like, crisped them all.
Because at one of those ships, one of those scout ships from the mothership literally flies, like, 5 feet above the ground, and these guys are just kind of ducking under it. Like, clearly that thing must have burned their face off.
Right. Oh, but that's what I was saying about the Melinda Dilla thing. So, you brought up, like, she's in Christmas Story, but wasn't the neighbor from Home Alone also?
Yeah, he was the
up there?
He was the guy that was another sightings guy that
Yeah.
he saw Bigfoot, and he kind of ruined the credibility of that whole group like in one shot.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that was him. When I saw him, I'm like, I know that guy, and then I thought, I'm like, oh, that's the neighbor.
So we got some Christmas classic actors in this, but also like I guess along with Christmas Story, like this took place in Indiana quite a bit. So,
yeah, there you go.
So she's your go-to Indiana. She's your go-to Hoosier actress.
She feels very Indiana.
Yeah.
In her performances. Yeah, she was great. Yeah, I mean, I know I said it already, but I really would have liked to see more of her story in this now rewatching this, especially with how Dreyfus just kind of picks up and leaves at the end. It's like, okay, man, you obviously have a different obsession now.
I mean, it's funny. It's like on paper, the movie shouldn't work. And, in some senses, it is a little unsatisfying. But,
What's unsatisfying?
Just like the structure of the story. It's like, okay, we spent all this time with him, like, with his family being ruined or whatever, and then what? Nothing. Like, well, then why did we spend so much time with it? Like, either, like, let's have that be a part of the story, or let's just focus on the alien thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you, as the audience, kind of forget about that because the ending is just so hypnotic and amazing and just sort of glorious and beautiful and all these other things that like you kind of forgot that like yeah, kind of like you were saying, like in the middle you're spending so much time on this other thing.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that end sequence it was based on, if it's not based on it, I'd be surprised, but there's this story about Project Serpo. I don't know if you've ever heard of this story that happened while Reagan was president. And hold on a second. A UFO just flew over.
Oh.
I couldn't identify it, so it's official.
Yeah. Would you like to report a UFO?
Negative. We don't want to report.
Apparently, Reagan was briefed on this subject called Project Serpo, and it was about 12 astronauts that were just civilians. Well, there were scientists involved too, but there were some just civilians that were chosen for this as well. But it was a project to send them to a planet called Serpo to meet the Ebens, who were basically the Greys that were at the end of Close Encounters. And that scene where you see all those people in the red jumpsuits getting briefed and then put onto that ship, that was supposed to be a direct relation to that conspiracy story.
Oh, I see. And I'm sorry, where did the story come from? Maybe I missed that detail. It was
so you can find it online if you look up Project Serpo. It's a transcription of a conversation between some head of state or some head of security, and then our national security person talking to Reagan and briefing him on this entire thing about where these creatures or where these aliens come from, that we sent people to their planet.
And Reagan is telling him this stuff, or this guy is telling Reagan this?
Reagan is listening to it and responding.
Oh, listening. I see.
Yeah,
I see. And the person who spoke to the national security guy was the neighbor from Home Alone. It was like, yeah, there's Bigfoot, and then there was Serbo. And
exactly. Yeah.
Back in Sequoia National Park. Had a foot on her. 37 inches. Heel to toe.
Where do you think Bigfoot came from, buddy?
But I do think Spielberg...
You don't just get a woodland ape. Okay?
Yeah, no, they got to come from somewhere in space. I think it's interesting, though, how much Spielberg did borrow from a lot of, UFO. It's like he put everything that he's ever read in any UFO report or any sighting report, and he put it in this movie. It almost made it difficult for other people to make a movie about it, because he's like, oh, you already put that in there. It's like, shit,
Yeah,
another abduction. Kid got abducted. Damn it, we can't do an abduction movie now.
And he does all these things so well of like, he shows the air traffic controllers, and okay, it feels very real. Richard Dreyfuss was like working for the electric company or whatever, and he's a lineman or something, and going out trying to find this thing, and then he gets just sucked into the vortex of being obsessed with this thing. These I guess these little spacecraft are out there to like sort of seduce people to try and come to Wyoming. But he does such a good job of like kind of grounding it in all these like things that we recognize of like this is a UFO, see, and it's a pie plate that I painted, and like and showing the things that we recognize, and then playing on our suspicions and fears and things. Like, it's like you see those like Piggly Wiggly trucks and Baskin Robbins trucks, like full of equipment and whatnot, and
how are we going to get people out of this 300-mile range? We'll just say that there's a giant toxic spill somewhere, right? The air's bad or whatever. Right. And that one guy takes his mask off. He's like, the air's better than Los Angeles.
Yeah. Oh boy, does that seem familiar? But like, yeah, so, and then like the media coverage, everything else. And I guess all these movies kind of do that, and perhaps there was some inspiration from this one in particular, but finding the sort of like cultural response to these sorts of verifications or suspicions is such an interesting aspect in all three of these movies. But I guess one last thing on the Richard Dreyfuss story, and like obviously Close Encounters, I mean, it was a huge hit, which it's kind of crazy because it seems like it would have fallen by the wayside due to the huge hit of the
right
of the movie that came out a couple months before, Star Wars, right? But it wasn't. It was maybe not equally, but it was also a huge hit at that time.
To be a sci-fi movie nerd in that year, like I would be losing my mind. Like
right,
you get
exactly.
Star Wars and then this one.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's like this is the Star Wars is like the uber like fantasy, and this is like the more grounded one, but still a fantasy, I guess. But or more recognizable, I should say. But it's like so it shouldn't be a surprise that this movie inspired Denis Villeneuve, and he talks about it a lot, Close Encounters, that is. But he talks about something like where it's like he has this interesting quote about like how scary it would be that this idea that a passion or a dream could be more powerful than love. He found that like terrifying, and so the Richard Dreyfuss character and like the things that were explored there, it kind of like apparently deeply wounded his psyche, and like kind of made him afraid of those things. When he apparently it kind of related to maybe his parents were getting a divorce or something at the time as well, and so like that played into it. But apparently the movie really impacted him, but he also discovered Francois Truffaut by watching this movie.
Really?
And, like you got into the French New Wave and apparently, got into cinema after that. So it's like, in a lot of ways, Close Encounters, gave us Denis Villeneuve.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I loved Arrival. I don't want to jump over Contact, but I do have to say how I think Arrival runs circles around these other movies in terms of quality. I think it's so damn good.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. Yeah.
And a totally different movie. A totally, completely different movie. I feel like Contact and Contact follows a lot of the same beats that Close Encounters follows. It kind of opens up with a similar situation, only we get our lead actress, Jodie Foster, watching or listening to space, and getting it confused with very terrestrial sounding things, when they think that there's some sort of signal coming from somewhere else. But it did kind of remind me
how
of
awesome
the
is that sound? You know
yes.
what I mean? It's like,
yeah, they did a great job with that.
Such a great job of imagining that. And I guess so did Close Encounters of being able to get those tones and to really kind of have that iconic sound. But anyway, sorry, you're talking about
I was speaking of the sound in in Contact. I hadn't seen this movie since it first came out. I probably saw it in the theater when it first came out. That's the last time I saw it. I remember being disappointed then. I actually really enjoyed it this time. But that in-intro is one of the most amazing intros to a movie. Is when we are on Earth and we hear the radio sounds, and it's
we start in just in total
silence.
Black.
Yeah.
And then cut to that shot of Earth at whatever outside the stratosphere, and it's just like this radio sound, and it's like holy shit,
it's like litter, right? It's like trash of sound in there. It's just this mess. And then as we're backing out from Earth, we go all the way back till you start seeing the pillars of life and all these celestial objects that are out there, and then the sound breaks down too.
And the radio gets older and older and older as we go back.
That's what. Yeah, exactly. So you start hearing things from the 50s,
and then and then it's just silence after that.
Yeah,
which is I don't know. It was wild.
It was really cool to see. I think that gave a really good representation of how small we actually are. Where we kind of sit in the general scheme of things, we're very minuscule.
It's sort of like the Carl Sagan blue marble idea.
Yeah, exactly.
The only home we've ever known.
I would like to get this off my chest in terms of Contact. I think that this movie was great up until the very end, and I feel like this is one of those situations where the ending just ruined the movie for me. I don't feel like this ending.
What are you calling the ending? What do you mean?
I'm calling the ending when she meets the alien, her dad.
Yeah.
And I think that it was a major cop-out. I think that an alien that would be so intelligent to think that this will be less confusing to you to show you your dead father that you've been pining over for the last 2 hours of this movie. And it's no, that would confuse me even more. I don't want to see anybody I know. I want to see something new, because if I start seeing somebody that has passed away when I was 9 years old, I'm going to be more confused and I'm going to have more questions that don't relate to what I'm here for. Right, you know what I mean? So although I thought that was kind of weak, and I thought the effects at the end were a little bit, I don't know, dated, I guess, at this point, I still think that it was a really great setup, and I loved John Hurt's character. I thought he was great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, how he just kind of sent
Plain
himself
Lex
to
Luthor or whatever.
Exactly, he was Lex Luthor. That's exactly what he was, and with bald head and everything, obviously due to cancer. But I liked that he flew himself up to space just so he could slow down the cancer progression in his body. It was just.
Well, I forgot how much that sort of paid off.
Yeah,
and that's the other thing that I hear what you're saying, and I think a lot of it has to do with the alien Caribbean beach that looks like a trapper keeper.
Pensacola, Florida, you mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. And she drew those trees, and obviously this is coming out of her head.
Why didn't they just shoot it in Pensacola though? It would have been a really cool effect to have something so real.
Yeah.
That she would have no idea. But instead, she was touching the false walls around her, and it was just.
I mean, they're making it make sense of why it looks so funky. It's just that there is maybe they're dialed up to 8 on the funk meter, and they needed to kind of bring that back to 5 or something. Just temper it in a way, because just aesthetically, you're you start to tune out. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there's something interesting about that sequence that I didn't think about until after, like, you know, she went through the little, you know, Spanish Inquisition about, you know, did this actually happen to you? And sort of questioning whether these things happen or not. Because, you know, while we're there, we're seeing her go through these wormholes, we're seeing her go through these things and sort of experiencing it from her point of view. But then, you know, while she's there, you know, she's asked, like, how did you build this thing or whatever? And they're like, we didn't. You know, it was here billions of years before us.
Yeah.
And all of the things she's seen and imagining, you know, were clearly sort of pulled out of her head. That Pensacola, Florida thing, her dad, all that kind of adds to, did this happen or not happen? Or is this kind of a hallucination of hers or whatever? But also it touches on this idea of, like, you know, the whole question in the movie is, like, you know, between sort of spirituality and, like, you know, is there, you know, her atheism versus, like, you know, the Matthew McConaughey, you know, sort of
priest,
bimbo priest or whatever.
Bimbo priest. There you go. Yeah.
But, like,
priest. Are you really a man of the cloth without the cloth or whatever? However you put it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. But the questions of, you know, the infinite and the higher power and all these things.
Sure.
And if that machine was there for these aliens billions of years before that, like, you know, who was behind that, right? And
yeah.
And was that the high power? So, like, it kind of, you know, it ties into these themes. I think, you know, part of it is some of those funky aesthetic choices. And then maybe the other part is, you know, the intense schmaltz level of the music that it ends on.
Yes.
You know, and I love Alan Silvestri, but god damn, man. It was like...
It was kind of too Forrest Gumpy for you?
It was like, let's take Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
But pour... you know, syrup on top of that, and, you know, that, and then, like, you know, dip it into an anthill, and you're like, oh god.
These are the list of songs that Alan Silvestri didn't use for Forrest Gump that they repurposed.
But what's funny is, like, you know, there's a lot of places where the score is really awesome.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then there's, you know, that part where it's just like, you know, it wasn't striking the right tone. And
I agree.
And I think because the movie leaves you on that note, sort of just the opposite of Close Encounters, where Close Encounters, like, you know, hits you with the shock and awe of this thing, so you forget that, like, it didn't satisfy the story beats and, like, didn't wrap up the character of Richard Dreyfuss.
But still, the amazement there, the wonderment, and, like,
yeah, exactly. Because it's so wonderful, it, like, fools your emotions into thinking the movie was satisfying. Whereas this one, because, you know, they didn't hit those things in the ending, it fools you into thinking that the rest of the movie was not as fun or as engaging as it was.
Although I did find that the epilogue, if you will, of James Woods' character finding out that there were, you know, 12 or 18 hours of static. I think that if they took that one step further and took that static that they thought was noise, just like the original signal, and, like, started putting a visual with it, I think that would have been a better tie-in to what happened originally.
Oh, wait, are you saying the 18 hours of static, like, perhaps there was a message thing in there or something?
Exactly. So instead of it just being static, maybe if they, like, you know, separated everything, the interlacing, as they called it, you know.
No, those are classified. That's not happening.
Yeah. I mean, I would just like more of that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but those aesthetic choices, I think it's, you know, described it as saccharine earlier, but it's like, it's kind of like those, like, fake sugar substitutes where it's like, oh, it tastes like sugar, and then all of a sudden you have this, like, terrible aftertaste, and, like, because of that aftertaste, that's the only thing you remember from the movie. It leaves you on that sort of wrong note.
Yeah.
And then you come out of it, you're like, maybe it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But you forget how awesome some of these moments are, and it's like, you know, like some of those spirituality questions, like some of that stuff where it's like, you know, she's like, I'm a scientist, I need proof of everything, and it's like, okay, well, did you love your father? What? Yes.
Prove it.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Right? And her fucking world is rocked with that, you know.
Where's the tangible thing that you can point to? You know, there is something that's beyond the tangible, and I think that's kind of what it goes into. I also wanted to say how awesome, I believe his name's William Fichtner, her blind assist. He is so good in whatever he does, and he has me fooled in this movie that he is blind.
Right.
Just the way that he's kind of, you know, fidgety, or, I mean, it's just really well done. He's a great actor.
No, he's great, and he's kind of, like, underrated as, like, an actor, because, you know, he plays like a character actor, and I think, you know, maybe because of some of the stuff with Michael Bay, he's kind of, like, gotten typecast as this, like, you know, he's some sort of military, you know, like a general or
second in command third in command.
Yeah, he's always exactly. He's like the
he's never the captain. Yeah.
He's always like the confidant for the captain or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. He's right there.
Yeah, the right hand man.
Just can't get that damn promotion.
Right.
But he's great, and Tom Skerritt I thought was great in this. Yeah. I did think Tom Skerritt went out
Tom Skerritt, John Hurt.
Yeah.
Is this a sequel to Alien?
Exactly. Like you've got Kane versus Dallas here. Yeah. But I thought that he went out kind of unceremoniously with the Jake Busey preacher man,
right.
Which was, okay, and I think it worked for, again, the themes of the story, right? Like he was, well, I don't know what he was trying to do. I guess he was trying to stop them from going to see the aliens for some reason.
I mean, it's, that...
end is nigh kind of feeling.
Those with, spiritual tendencies and, who believe in a higher power and whatever, like the sort of spectrum of those folks are also represented here. Like, it's not just the cold scientists or whatever, and it's not just a single type of man of faith. They show like those who are psychotic snake handling and complete reactionary and can't deal with it, so they blow it up version, and then the kind of like airport book pseudo philosophical version that Matthew McConaughey plays. But I think that worked. It's like all these movies kind of like really get into how the world is disrupted by this thing and how it would react, right? And like and they all do it so well, and I think this is part of that. He was serving the sort of karmic justice of like Tom Skerritt being a complete asshole. And
exactly,
like,
he got his.
Like,
I get it.
He's like, hey, listen, I'd love to be in a world where the right thing happens all the time, and you do the good thing, and that you get rewarded for it. But we don't live in that world.
Funny, I've always believed that the world is what we make of it.
It expresses those different philosophies, and this guy gets punished for his his backstabbing and disgusting behavior.
Yeah, but I mean, and then there was already another device that was built simultaneously somewhere else, hidden, on some remote island. So there wasn't really a consequence to losing the. What did they? I mean, at the time they said 300 billion. I think it was like 750 billion or something, which. It would probably be so inflated for today's prices. Like that thing would cost $10 trillion probably, whatever they built,
These are pre-9/11 dollars.
Exactly.
It does sort of act as like a good sort of, second act low point or turning point where you think all hope is lost for this thing because, they went through all this trouble to build this giant thing over months and months and months, and then all of a sudden it just blows up unceremoniously before they could even test the crash test dummy or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, just kidding, there's another one.
Did they even have time to test the second one, or did they just send Jodie Foster in there?
No, they didn't. She was the test dummy.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I am okay to go!
I do want to talk about how obviously they did some studies on wormholes and how they work and things like that, because there was a lot involved there, and I thought that the visuals of her going through the wormholes were so cool. Like just going to different places almost instantaneously, like you're basically like wrapped in almost a shield of gravity where nothing really affects you from outside, and you can be anywhere at any time or like instantaneously. And I thought that was awesome and very much in line with a lot of the theoretical science behind it.
I loved everything about that wormhole sequence, except for the one part where they morph her face into a little kid. Her younger self or something.
Yeah.
Saying one of the lines she said when she was a kid, and they morph it back, and it just, I don't know, it was one of those like wrong choice aesthetically.
I had problems with that, and I had problems with the Forrest Gump. Let's put all the actors in with Bill Clinton, and and
right.
I feel like Forrest Gump did those scenes better. I feel like those. I was more convinced that Forrest Gump was sitting there talking to John Lennon as opposed to
No Religion too.
Yeah. They were like Tom Skerritt's kind of sitting there awkwardly, like looking over. I was like, I don't think he's really there.
That was a really cool device that they had throughout the movie. That was like,
Yes.
I agree that the Bill Clinton thing like didn't work very well, but just like the sort of fluid camera that would always be kind of moving around, and like you'd be seeing a TV screen, you'd be moving to another character, they're watching another TV screen. There's just like, you know, 10 million TV screens all around them all the time. Even in a single room, there's like this like hilarious setup where the camera sort of pulls out of a television to reveal we're in a room. And then we see Jodie Foster, and she's looking the opposite direction, and there's another screen right behind her. And wait, what was the purpose of the two screens in the room?
Visual aesthetics.
No, but I mean, you don't question those things. Just like in Close Encounters, when like, I don't know if you remember, there's this like shot where they first introduced like the red jumpsuited guys when they're setting up the Piggly Wigglies and whatever.
Yeah.
But there's this shot like underneath a big rig, and we see some people pile out of a van. And then, we kind of, pan right. But the thing that motivates us panning right is a guy, soldier or whatever, like crab walking underneath the trailer. And we kind of like follow that guy. And like, it's like, wait, why would he walk underneath this thing? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, like, but
This is Earl. He does everything more difficult than needs to be.
Right.
Don't ask him
asshole,
to fix anything.
Around, okay, you're not saving any time. No,
but it looked cool.
But it's like, that's what motivated the camera move, and like, and they kind of do that here in Contact. But like, you don't really notice it. It was just one of those like stupid things that I would like think about later. Like, well, why did they have that TV right behind her? And like,
Yeah, I think in general, Robert Zemeckis is just a visual master. I think his movies all look amazingly both fantastical and grounded at the same time, and he can pull it off. Back to the Future is a great example of that. Like, again, one of those movies that should be too cheesy to work, but it does,
Right, well, and he does like these awesome blocking things in that, where it's like, they're at the high school, and like Marty's standing close to camera, then he walks upstage, and then Doc like runs downstage to the camera, and they kind of like switch back and forth.
They switch sides,
and Marty's kind of chasing him as Doc's like mind is being blown every 10 seconds.
But it was just like a nice little rap, back and forth between the two.
Great Scott!
Speaking of his visual prowess, like in this one, he would do these like completely unnecessary, sort of like but awesome like show off shots where it's like young Ellie finds her dad, passed out on the floor or dead or whatever it was. And like she runs back upstairs, we crank to ultra slow motion as she's going down that hallway. And then we're following her into the bathroom, and then it turns out we were inside the mirror the entire time as she like opens the medicine cabinet.
Holy shit. That one blew me away, because like there's no cutaway either. You are in the mirror that whole time.
You're in the mirror and you go around the corner the whole time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're kind of used to it now, but like we'll do these things where the camera will sort of fly through a window and into the scene, and we'll start the scene. And he does that a couple times in this one, but this bathroom mirror thing was a little extra on that.
Ridiculous.
A little over the top, but it was great.
There's awesome. He's also really good about passing time real quickly. And the one example is young, and this was another one of those, young Ellie's becomes older Ellie, like in one, I think, cut. And he also did that in Castaway. And there's a scene of the fish getting hit by the spear, and then it's like months later or years later.
Tilt up, and oh my god.
Unbelievable. Wow. I mean, it kind of goes back to like 2001, right? I mean, we go from, prehistoric age to space travel. Yeah. Totally, I mean, just awesome.
Okay. Class is dismissed.
So let's get into Arrival.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Did I forget how incredibly good this movie is?
Yeah.
This one...
So you've seen all these movies before, right?
Yeah. These ones definitely. Arrival I'd only seen once, so this was only the second time I got to see it. But I was blown away even more than I was the first time. Even knowing the ending to this one, I was still blown away by how it is structured and how they fool you. I mean, you feel like you're in a flashback for most of that movie, and you're in a flash forward for most of it. She sees, and really, like, when you think about it, if you look back at it, she's seeing everything all at once from the beginning. You know what I mean?
Or it's sort of like the first, like, let's say 3 minutes where we see the entire life of her daughter.
Amazing sequence, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. But it's like this, essentially, you think of it kind of like a cold open, where she's like, this is the story of your life. And then the story starts when she's like going to her job at the college or whatever. Or I think it starts when she's on the phone with her mom. But then like she goes to the college, and then at the end when things are getting sort of jumbled up timeline wise, that's her sort of experiencing, you know, alien time or you know, the sort of non-linear time.
Pretty neat that the, you know, part of that science was that if you're learning a language from that species or whoever is speaking that language, you'll start thinking in the same way that species thinks, you know, and they speak in a non-linear fashion. Everything happens all at once, and that's why everything's like in that circular pattern, and then all of a sudden she starts thinking that way.
And then you can communicate with that. It's like, and it's, yeah, yeah, exactly. It's kind of mind blowing, but they did a good job of like explaining this really, really complicated thing.
Yeah.
And kind of just getting you to understand, you know, how it works, even though I watched it a couple days ago and now I've kind of forgotten some of those details, but in the moment, you're not feeling confused. You're like, what the fuck? You know, like, it's not like that.
Yeah, because I mean, the basis of the movie is her trying to communicate with aliens, and then ultimately to get, you know, what they thought was weapon. It was more knowledge, or you're going to learn our communication, which in turn is going to help you out because...
Or like weapon was tool or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
Right, because humans are going to help us out in 3,000 years. It's like, how the hell did you know that?
Well, because... Yeah.
I thought that line in that movie blew me away. I was like, I almost felt sick to my stomach because I was like, they can see how we're going to end up helping them generations after generations now, but you know, they're here now to plant that seed.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, and it's also like a really amazing adaptation of this like short story. If you've ever read,
I read the ending of it online after I watched this because I wanted to see how close it was. It was pretty close. They did a good job of portraying it in the film.
Yeah, I mean, but they did open it up a lot more and kind of like give it. Obviously made it a lot more cinematic as well, like, and then like doing things that, you know, would be a lot harder to do in short story form, like having the sort of, you know, time jumping cross cutting for the last whatever that is, you know, 25 minutes of the movie where it's just like we're kind of jumbled like throughout time the whole for the whole sequence. And it's like, you know, the movie's really heady. There's a lot of sort of philosophy in it, but it's like, you know, there's also a lot of fun adventure in it that I had forgotten about. And then, you know, the sort of like personal story that's in there that's, you know, sort of heart-wrenching and really amazing.
Well, I like that Contact was kind of the difference between faith and science. And then in this one, it was more between language and science. And that was the argument, which was more important or which built, you know, a civilization or like would build a culture. You know, what is that? And she thinks, you know, it's based in language. And then her future husband, Jeremy Renner's character, is like, no, it's science, you know?
Yeah.
But the two of them together were such a great pair in learning what these creatures were, that were fucking awesome, by the way. For being a CG creature, that was it looked like a hand, you know, that was like on the ground, and the fingers.
But it turns out those are just like the feet or whatever.
That thing was gigantic.
Yeah.
And then all the change of gravity in the ship, and you know, the different atmospheres and how things were just nothing made sense. And I think that really sold me in the fact that this is an otherworldly thing. This giant shell, as they called it, should not be able to fly. It shouldn't be sitting this far off the ground, you know, without moving, and you shouldn't be able to change gravity at will inside of, you know, like it was just so well done.
You okay?
Yeah.
So all these movies are these are all sort of friendly aliens, let's say, and you know, this is opposed to the War of the Worlds, or like what's the one with Klaatu, Verata, Nikto? I'm like forgetting the name of that one.
The Day the Earth Stood
Yes.
Still.
God, thank you. Like, you know,
Evil Dead.
Or yeah. Are you thinking of Army of Darkness?
Yeah, damn it, that's what.
But you know, instead of alien invasion and you know, colonization and or you know, xenocide, it's about this contact thing. You know, where we're trying to you know, say what's up. And this one does this thing that like wasn't really in Close Encounters. Now, part of it is that the Richard Dreyfuss character in that one was already just so seduced and, drawn to this thing that, he wasn't questioning any of it. It didn't have any fear about it. But in this one, think about the like fear that they were experiencing when they first got there. I mean, like the person who had Amy Adams' job before she got there, we saw being carted off on a stretcher. On a stretcher at the very beginning. It was just
what happened to him? Some people can't really handle this job. Which job? The one I just took?
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That should have been part of the interview process, Forrest Whitaker.
That's something like I think they touch on a little bit of contact with maybe the James Woods character and his fear of these things, but all of the characters had that sort of like
well, that's xenophobia, right? What James Woods had.
But he was kind of the voice of like maybe these guys aren't here to just teach us language and
they're teaching us how to build ourselves a bomb and then we're going to set it off and blow ourselves up.
right, exactly. The Trojan horse thing.
Yeah, the Trojan horse idea. Yeah.
But in this one, you get the scariness of it all, but then it kind of gives way to sort of the awe of and excitement of trying to communicate and whatever. And I guess I have to be fair. Like in Close Encounters, they did have certain moments where pieces of it were scary. I mean, like the Barry getting sucked out of the house or whatever. That was terrifying
for the mother, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess not for Barry. He was just like, this was fun.
Yeah, the kid loved it. But yeah, that's why I think that her story would have been a greater story to tell, really, to focus on, because she had a lot of loss there.
All right, Spielberg, we need a fourth cut of this movie, okay?
We need to cut it one more time. Close Encounters of the Fourth Time.
Yeah. There you go. It just writes itself, exactly.
Mom,
Done.
look! The sun's here!
I love some of the connections to other Villeneuve movies in this. Like Enemy in particular.
Oh, yeah.
A couple times.
I know which one you're going to say, too.
Like, I think there were two big ones for me, which is like one, obviously when she's kind of like freaking out in the sort of army tent or whatever, and she's like, yeah, sometimes you just kind of like are experiencing different things. And she looks over to the side of the room and there's that giant alien hand thing. Yeah, that's like the size of the room, which looks so much like the
spider,
the giant spider at the end of
even
Enemy.
The creatures I felt looked kind of like that giant spider.
Yeah.
That one that was over Toronto, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And like in Toronto there was that like thick layer of smog that was kind of covering it, and the fog in this one too, that kind of had that same an echo of that. But also just her showing up to her lecture hall at the college, it just looks so similar.
Yeah.
To the one that Jake Gyllenhaal was teaching in or whatever.
I wonder if that was
in Enemy.
I didn't even think about that. I totally forgot about that because he was a professor, right?
Yeah, and in that one you see him like 3 times kind of delivering this lecture about totalitarianism or whatever, and then in this one like she starts to talk about this lesson, and it's like, does anybody pay attention? Like,
can you turn on the TV, please?
Yeah.
Class dismissed.
That really, really felt like 9/11. Like, it really, like, he kind of captured what that day was like, where it was like, she was off in her own world, sort of walking into the school, like everyone was gathered around that big TV in the lounge area, and then she just like was completely oblivious to it. She starts her day. She's on autopilot. It's funny, in the beginning, they do this like great thing because they show you that cold open of her daughter dying. You think that like the start of her story, which is actually years earlier,
right,
is that she's depressed because of those events.
That's what I mean. You think it's a flashback,
and I think they give you enough of a hint to kind of explain why she's feeling so low in those moments.
Right.
Which is essentially her first interaction with Forrest Whitaker.
About the insurgents.
He's like, I want to recruit you because you made so much, you made quick work of those, insurgent translations. He's like, yeah, but you made quick work of those insurgents. And like, maybe she was feeling very guilty or whatever about being a part of that. Or I mean, she didn't know what she was getting into type of thing. And, and she's like in this low point in her life and she's like on autopilot. And she doesn't even notice what the hell's going on she gets in there. You know, the kids tell her that, hey, there's something going on here. And she's like, all right, well, let's get out of here. And everyone leaving, like that tectonic shift everyone felt of like, hey, there's everyday life and things just happen. And we know what to expect. And it's just one foot in front of the other. And then all of a sudden this thing that changes it. And all of a sudden you don't have those things to rely on. And like the solid ground you were standing on all of a sudden isn't solid anymore. And like that feeling is captured so well in that moment. Like that's kind of exactly what it felt like on 9/11. In, you know, on top of the sort of fear and whatever else that was sort of happening.
I'm sure that was very similar to when Kennedy was killed too. People wrapped around TVs and all watching the news, you know, consistently for 24 hours straight or 48 hours straight, and
and things sort of standing still, and you know, like there's that little like wreck in the parking lot that like, you know, it's just like she's sort of walking. It's kind of in the
that was great.
Yeah.
That was effective for being like a little crash. It was like really cool because it was that's exactly what you'd see. I feel like that's what you'd see.
Yeah, no,
you know?
exactly. It was like such a perfect detail to kind of like understand what's happening in that world at that moment.
I do think one of Forrest Whitaker's lines was a little idiotic, though, when he's like, well, you had no problem with the Farsi language. And it's like, do you think that these things in these ships are speaking Farsi, dude?
He's like, yeah, but that's because I knew Farsi already, asshole. Like, this language has been established.
Pretty easy to understand a language that I already understand.
Right. I mean, he's a little thick. Okay.
Come on, Forrest.
Everything you're doing there, I have to explain to a room full of men whose first and last question is how can this be used against us?
But like, how great was that story too, where it was like, she's like, well, what about kangaroo? And she like tells this whole like story.
The bullshit story.
And he's like, okay, I get it. And then he leaves.
That'll work
and
for
she's
now.
like, wow, I did. Jeremy Renner's like, I never heard that story. He's like, yeah, it's because it's bullshit.
But it proves
got
the point,
yeah,
didn't
exactly.
it? It made the point. And it did make the point. I was pretty sold on that story. That actually made a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny how like all three of these movies I feel like kind of fit in so well together here. It's like the scene where we're, you know, sort of flying over Montana and we see like the gathering of the protesters or not protesters, the onlookers, let's say, at the edge of the base. And then we kind of like, you know, the camera tilts up and we see in the distance that giant, you know, floating alien being or whatever, you know, but that looks like how it looked on the edge of, or when the news came out in Contact and there's like this, you know, giant gathering of people like beam me up and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of sort of, you know, news and TVs kind of playing in the background, like this movie had that too, although like it was less of a focus than it was in Contact. Like it was very much in the background here, but like, you know, it gets set up and then there's like a lot of like, you know, YouTube radicalization as well, with those like, you know, 4 soldiers who are like, well, we have to fuck this thing up. And like, it's scary. So they do a really good job of sort of planting all those things and explaining all of them, but, you know, focusing on what they need to focus on, which is sort of Louise's story.
And also that the theme behind the fact that she knew exactly what her and Jeremy Renner's characters were going to experience with their daughter, but she still went through with it. You know, she still, even though knowing what the outcome would be, she still pursued that like lifeline or that timeline. You know, she could have changed it. She could have not married him. She could have not had that child. And, you know, they would have both been, I guess, free of that, you know, burden of watching your kid die. And clearly that was why Jeremy Renner leaves her later on.
Right. And I'd forgotten about that detail too.
That's a beautiful storyline.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's like, it's one of those things where as it's going, you're like, okay, so they're divorced. And I was like, okay, I forgot that they explained where that came from, which is that, you know, she told him what was going to happen and that there's nothing they can do to change it, but that's just what it is. He couldn't accept it and get, you know, like freaked out about it. And, you know, his daughter was saying like how, you know, there's some line about like, oh, you know, he doesn't look at me the same way or something like that. You
exactly.
know? For Louise, having this knowledge is, doesn't change what she'd want to do, but, you know, it's kind of part of how she views things and deals with things now. For Jeremy Renner, obviously, that was a lot more of a burden, and he couldn't handle that, you know, that knowledge. And there is something really interesting thinking about how, and this is the kind of thing that like Denis Villeneuve does so well, not just sort of aesthetically, but also just sort of like exploring these big ideas and the sort of the philosophy and these things. Like, he was clearly sort of impacted by the sort of divorce story that's in Close Encounters. He kind of reinterprets it here in a way, but does it in such a different way. The idea was that like, so she now sees things in this alien time, and like, normally the way we process time, it's like, okay, it always goes forward, never backwards, and like, part of the thing that allows us to cope with grief is being able to sort of forget the sort of immediacy of the pain and grief. If you couldn't forget that, then it would always be just as fresh every single moment,
because it's all constantly happening,
right? And sort of recovery or coping mechanism that is in this non-linear time, or like experiencing all time, or whatever it is that the alien time experiences, isn't so much like forgetting, but not being fixed at a point in time, in the sense that like, okay, the death happens and it's very painful and it's awful, and you feel bad, but like then you can immediately be in these different periods of time, and that's expressed so fantastically in the beginning of the movie, where it's like, she's like, yeah, I remember all kinds of moments with you, and it's like, we see the like 6-year-old Hannah, and she's like, I love you, and then like the 12-year-old Hannah, I hate you, and like, it's just like all these like these different moments, and like, and it seems like paced like so perfectly.
Yeah. Throughout the whole thing, I kept feeling like it felt like Enemy to me, or like in the same world as Enemy. Like visually and all
definitely
that. Definitely
a lot
sound effects.
Less, I don't know, cold. Like Enemy was
cold.
Pretty cold. Yeah. Like, and this one was.
Well, I think there was a little bit more hope in this one, story and narratively.
Yeah, exactly. Which is something you wouldn't expect coming out of like a movie where the whole thing is that like, I mean, technically the last thing we see, if we were to look at it in the way we perceive time, is her daughter dying. And for a movie that's sort of about that, and or sort of leading to that, they do it in a very sort of uplifting and hopeful way, and and it is sort of affirming. It's like, the very last thing she says is sort of affirmative to wanting to have a baby. She's like,
right,
do you want to make a baby? And she's like, yes, and then we're done.
Yeah, I still feel like, though, Jeremy Renner's character kind of was done poorly at the end. I mean, he didn't like the news that he was given, and I get it. I guess that's really hard news to take. Your daughter is going to die. You can't do anything about it. But at the same time, they just kind of wiped him out, and he was no longer seen
as a character. Well, that's the thing, is like, I mean, it's, this movie is very firmly from Amy Adams' perspective.
Absolutely.
And, there's a different movie where it's from Jeremy Renner's perspective, and he's very frustrated, and like, I don't understand, like, what do you mean she's gonna die? What do you, I mean? And it could be like, we'd see his story, and that's a different movie. But like, although there is the point where like he's giving voiceover to like kind of fast forward through the months of like learning their language. I don't know if you remember in the middle of the movie, like,
yeah,
which is odd because from the rest of the movie, it's from her perspective very, very firmly.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But it was like what, like a journal entry almost, like, and he was,
that's what it felt like, yeah,
his journal entry. Yeah, that's a kind of a head scratcher structure-wise.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
But there were two things that kind of really brought home the bacon on the ending for me. Like, one was the sequence of Louise getting, or Amy Adams getting the meeting General Shang at the party, and sort of like, relaying that information, and like, and how it was, cut together of like him whispering in Mandarin and her repeating it, in a different time. It's like, it was
so wild,
so awesome. I love that sequence. And then,
because at that point she was using her superpowers, or her newfound powers,
exactly,
I should say.
Yeah. And it is one of those things where it's like, I guess this is also like a meditation on free will, what we're talking about here. And it's like, okay, you are free to do these things, but these things, are already known in this timeline. It's like, yeah, those are the choices you are going to make. You're free to change choices, but like these are the ones you're going to choose, type of thing. Anyway, it's kind of a mind-blowing way to think of those things. The sort of second half of like sort of sticking the landing for me was the ending we just talked about, where like her coming out of this experience and getting together with Jeremy Renner, having Hannah and kind of jumping around in time in that. And what's funny is like it's kind of a subtle moment. I don't think I caught it the first time, but like when she first hugs him after the thing is over, and they're outside in that sort of field and they're kind of packing up camp or whatever. She's like, oh, I forgot how good this feels. She's referring to like experiencing time in this crazy way.
Yeah.
But presumably this is the first time they've embraced, and like
he didn't really react to that.
Yeah, because maybe that if the line was what I just said, then you could read that as like, oh, okay, she hasn't been hugged in a while. It's like just from anybody.
that was the line though. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I forgot how good this feels, even though it hasn't happened yet.
Right, exactly.
I forgot how good it felt to be held by you.
Between these three films, so Contact and Arrival both have like takeaways or leave behinds from the aliens. Like we've got technology and Contact, right? And then Arrival, we've got a language. And apparently,
that's interesting. Like that's kind of like something that they didn't really address. Is like, okay, are they gonna run the machine again? Like in Contact?
Oh, in Contact?
Yeah. Like, I mean, they could. Well, why not? But anyway.
Right, that's what I mean. There's that leave behind. So there's more research to be done. There's like greater story beyond. And Arrival, the same thing. And I mean, I guess the question I have is anyone that's learning this new language of the heptapods, are they now going to all see the future and time in this strange nonlinear fashion? Or was this,
according to what she tells Forrest Whitaker,
this is the gift, right?
Like that is like, once you learn their language, you sort of learn their way of perceiving time. So I mean, it seems like it.
But think about what that means for the planet Earth. Arrival change, like you're talking about that tectonic shift of the world.
Yeah.
This absolutely would change the human race because we would all of a sudden be like thinking non-linearly in time, which totally would completely change every bit of physics we could even come up with. I mean, at that point, like everything goes out the door is what I'm saying, or out the window.
Yeah.
And it's like to think, I mean, Contact, you're right. Like they could go in it again, but will it work? Maybe it was a one-time thing. Arrival,
maybe they needed to have the 1.21 gigawatts for the to power the thing, and they're not
gonna. You need a bolt of lightning for that, man.
Problem is, we don't know when or where they're going to strike.
the stuff that the Arrival aliens leave, the heptapods, they leave something that is completely going to change the humanity, as they say. And because they gave us that weapon, that tool of language, now all of a sudden this is going to change everything. And that, I think that's where the ending of this movie really kind of opened me up to like more. I want more of this story in the best way. I mean, I'm glad the story is ending. I don't want a sequel or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely love to know like where that world goes after this, because it would be, it'd be a complete game changer.
No, exactly. And it's fascinating. And it's like, it leaves you with a very interesting thing to contemplate while you're, digesting the movie. But it is also like not the story they're telling, because it's like the aliens and like all this other stuff is like almost in the background, because the story
zombies,
sort of turns out to be about Louise and her story, and like making the decision to go through with the pregnancy, even though she knows where her daughter's going to end up.
Right. It's Night of the Living Dead, right? It's this crazy background event that's happening.
I see what you mean.
But we're focused on the people that are in the frame that are still dealing with this, whatever it could be.
You're getting the very subjective perspective on this piece of the story. You're getting this like tiny slice of the pie, and like you get a sense that the world's going on outside there, but you're really just in with Amy Adams, I think, for a lot of this. A couple other quick things I just wanted to say about this. Like, I think we touched on a lot of connections to Close Encounters, but one I had forgotten about until watching it again. Forrest Whitaker comes and seeks her out, toward the beginning, and she doesn't get the job right away, and he pieces out. She's sleeping at home. She's got those like giant windows at her sort of lake cottage there or whatever, and we see out her window while she's sleeping, these like two lights, from a distance coming in from far away, and it kind of reminded me a lot of the kind of Close Encounter, like blue lights, and like as it gets closer and it's like it's blinding light or whatever, it turns out it's just a giant helicopter, like those
right.
huge passenger carrier helicopters.
I love that, like kind of sleight of hand almost.
Right, exactly. But it felt like it was supposed to be playing on the idea of how Close Encounters works a little bit, but not making it so obvious that it couldn't be anything else. But like,
did you find a bunch of like the Easter egg UFOs in Close Encounters? Like in every shot of the night sky in that movie, there is one star that is like moving off the side, or like I was pointing them out. I'm like, oh shit! And then all of a sudden at the end, there was like the three of them that pop up, and you're like,
right. No,
so cool.
It was so good at having doing those details, and like also, what's hilarious is like the sort of mountains of Muncie, Indiana that they were going through in Close Encounters. It's like, wait, what? It's like overlooking that giant valley, and like the lights turn on. It's really dramatic and it looks great. But like, wait, where was this supposed to be?
Great shot, but isn't this like Utah or somewhere else?
Couldn't you set this in Colorado or something?
Yeah, exactly. This is like a Wyoming shot. Yeah, there was some of that, but I mean, I don't know. There's something really special and magical, I think was the right word that you used. The ending of that film with the colors and the sounds and the fact that it's clearly, normal instruments that are making, normal earthly instruments that are making the sounds that are coming off of certain things, especially that big like tuba.
Right.
That
blows out that window.
Oh man, I love that so much. But that's the only window that breaks.
Yeah.
There's glass all over that place. That's the one, but
it was a directed beam of tuba.
Yeah. But I love the aliens. Again, like comparing this to Contact, I think that Close Encounters went for the aliens, right? They're like, nope, it's the little gray aliens with the big eyes, as you know from all the stories. And then that one...
As you know from your Hot Topic poster with an alien with a bong or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. The big eyes with the big the joint hanging out of his mouth. And I think that was great. I thought that they did it really well. They actually had, I think it was children and little people dressed up, hundreds of them that were out there bringing them onto the ship. There was that one animatronic one that's at the beginning, right when it comes out. It looks
the spider
creepy
alien?
As yes.
Like the music cue when you first see that thing is like, you're like, oh,
it's scary, man.
It was pretty scary, and then like everyone's like looking at it, and then we cut back to it, and it's got his arms out, and it's like and it's like okay, never mind, not scary. You know what I mean? It's like the music like switch there is a. It's so striking.
Going back to the music, when the those Indian gentlemen are chanting the sounds that you hear at the end, and I love that when it was kind of one of those, describe a movie that you love without saying the name of the movie, and all the fingers go up in the air. Where did you hear the sound?
Yeah,
I thought that was great.
One of the things that always kind of stuck with me for Arrival was like, I had no idea what this movie was going to be. I was aware of Denis Villeneuve because of I think Prisoners, and I can't remember if I had seen Enemy yet. But and Sicario, I guess was already out by this time. So yeah, I had seen all three of those by the time Arrival came out. But they had some screening for this one at the Egyptian, a month or so before it came out, and
oh wow,
it was like, oh, do you want to check out this movie, this new Denis Villeneuve movie? Okay, fine. I went to it like not knowing a single fucking thing about it. It was just like, like just being totally, dropped in cold, and didn't know what to expect, and I was totally blown away by it.
Yeah, that sounds like one of the best ways to watch this movie.
Right, exactly.
To go in freezing cold. Like,
yeah.
do not tell me anything. Because it's so deep. It's so well done. From the get-go, it sucks you right in. I don't think that there's any boring part of this movie. Like, I feel like it just sucks you right through.
Right.
Like you call it a rocket sled. I think that that's exactly what this is. It's from one cool scene to the next.
Yeah.
And I just want to know what's next.
Exactly. They don't even have that lull period that we talked about with Close Encounters or whatever.
Yeah, it's really good. But this was a good block. I think that these all go really well together, even from different eras too, different decades here, and they're all
true.
pretty similar films that work together.
Yeah. No, well, at least Close Encounters was like a game changer for a lot of things, and it was super popular and a part of pop culture in a lot of ways. Contact, I think, was also popular in its time. I feel like maybe it's some of its luster's gotten lost, or people don't remember it in the same way. But yeah, I feel like in a way, like they're very sort of influential movies, and you can kind of see traces of each of them in the other ones, and yeah, I as a block, I think it was pretty exciting. Hey, so speaking of what kind of inspired this block, where does Brian stand on all this stuff?
So I am obviously really into this subject. I think that this is you mean aliens in real life?
Yeah, or like this tape that people were debating, and they need to come up with an explanation for or whatever.
So yeah, there's a few of them right now. Like one of them is the Nimitz encounter, which is the aircraft carrier off the coast here, Southern California. Nimitz is the one where they're David Fravor and 3 other pilots saw this thing called the Tic Tac that they've referred to it as.
Right. Was that the one from last year? But then they were investigating it this year.
Well, it had happened like 15 years ago or 12 years ago, but it did. But yes, it was released like last or 2 years ago. The video, and then it was. So there's 3 videos. One of them specifically is called the Gimbal, and that's the one that really shocks me a little bit, because they track this object through infrared, and it's like straight out of a UFO film, right? Like it's got the cylindrical shape or the disc-like shape. But this thing, as it's flying, is flying against the wind and not being affected by the wind whatsoever. And then it's also rotating within the same, within a plane that the planes can't do, but within one plane. So it's actually spinning as if it's on a gimbal, as opposed to making a slow turn and like a roll and a turn the way that we need to do. And then I think this stuff's really interesting because, like, we were talking about the radar controllers or the radar operators at these airports. This is where they're seeing these things, and most of these reports are coming directly from military grade equipment, right? So you'd think that this stuff is pretty high end, but they're seeing objects, and they're saying that this is on a daily basis now. They're coming out and saying this, like, this is blowing my mind. This guy Chris Mellon, who's I think he was a U.S. senator. He came out and Harry Reid was the U.S. senator that kind of pushed for all this stuff to be released. And then Chris Mellon's been like backing all this stuff up. But what's happening is that these reports are coming in from military folks that are saying that they're seeing objects falling from the sky from 60,000 or 80,000 feet up, or as high as our radar can actually measure, down to sea level in a matter of a second. And if we did that, if humans did that, we would be liquefied. You're talking about pulling 50 to 100 Gs going straight down. So
they're just using our atmosphere as a roller coaster, as a really cool roller coaster.
Well, now that's interesting that you're saying that, because I don't think atmosphere, or what they're thinking is that atmosphere doesn't affect them, so that these things become not multi-dimensional. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but they can. It's like an all-terrain vehicle. They can operate just as quickly in air as they can underwater. So if these things are operating in,
this is the abyss. We're thinking
Exactly.
the wrong way.
Well, see, that's a thing. Like, that's another thing. Like, are they under our water? You know, like, and if they are, I mean, they could probably find a really good place. You know, just go as deep as you can, because we're not even exploring our oceans. I think we've explored 8% of our oceans, or something ridiculous. Like,
which
we
is
haven't
like
even
75% of the planet.
Exactly. We don't even know what's on our own fucking planet, but we're like, oh, this guy must come from Zeta Reticuli. He might come from the Atlantic Ocean, man. You know, like, you never know. But yeah, this stuff is very interesting to me. And I really, like I said at the beginning, I love when big budget movies, or even like medium budget movies, but I love when a big budget movie and a big director does something really interesting with the subject matter. And I think these are 3 good examples of that.
Yeah, I do too. And I think I was going to offer my more Ellie Occam's razor observation, but I think I'd rather leave it like that. That was a pretty fun one to explore.
Well, now I want to know what you're going to say.
Well, the Occam's razor is the idea of,
All things being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be the right one.
which is, you know, that essentially these are, you know, things that are always happening around military bases and are just, you know, top secret military things, and or, you know,
drones,
purposeful, you know, misdirections, and you know, things to get people like fired up about.
So that's what they call that, the false flag.
Yeah, right,
a lot
exactly.
of conspiracy theorists want to say that
they're goblins, folks. False flag.
The militaries are gonna, you know, stage some sort of fake false flag alien invasion, you know, to try to create some sort of military-run country, you know, or something. That's
or it's just like, you know, it's a ploy for funding, or you know,
right.
Hey, forget what we're doing overseas in this country. Look, there's an alien.
Yeah, exactly. Now's the time, I guess, for them to be like, I guess people can handle this now. I mean, but I really, there's supposed to be a report that's coming out in June that it's supposed to clear everything up, but come on.
Are you talking about the magic bullet theory? Like, we get a lot of reports that, like, yeah, that don't offer those explanations. You know what I'm saying?
But a lot of these stories, they've said, oh, these things have been happening since biblical times. You know, like there's stories or there's pictures and pictographs written or drawn of, you know, crafts in the sky.
Well, now we're getting into Stargate.
Like, well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So, but wait, no, that's the thing. Yeah. So, you know, you go back to that ancient aliens or ancient astronauts theory, right? So that's fine. So now let's give the government 180 days to give us a report on, you know, 10,000 years of history, which is, you know, it's going to be a bullshit thing. We don't know what they are. They could be Chinese. They could be Russian. That's about it. That's what we're going to get out of the whole thing.
Right. Well, it'll be, yeah, if there is some sort of blame, it won't be us just doing these things. It'll be them over there, the scary Russians. You don't know what a Russian's up to.
Exactly.
Can you even read their language? No. You don't know what a Russian's up to.
This is why I think like we need to really do this atomic age UFO episode again, because that's what it's all about. It's all the Cold War. It's all about that, you know, fear of the people over there,
totally.
right? The nasty.
You know what's funny? Like I can't remember where I was reading the story. This is a while ago, so maybe I'm forgetting some details. But like, part of the thing with like it kicked off the space race was like, oh, Sputnik, right? The Russians put this you know, lump of tinfoil up in our atmosphere.
Yeah, shitty satellite.
Yeah, and like, you know, when the DoD got a hold of that information, they're like, oh, yeah, so what? You know, we've got this technology. We know that they don't have better technology. Like, you know, who cares? But then when the press got a hold of it, it was like, it bleeds, it leads. Think of all the possibilities this could mean. Yeah. Like for Russians, you know, getting to your children or whatever, and it's like, no,
spying.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like that sort of culture that sort of like, you know, drummed up and, you know, that came out of that, and then sort of like, you know, paranoias and fears and whatever that got spawned off that thing, you know, just based off of selling papers and everything else, right?
I mean, I feel like the 80s perpetuated that too, like
totally.
with Reagan and the Star Wars project, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So it was like same exact thing.
Well, and in that one, like they were doing a nuclear, what's it called? Like proliferation. I can't even say it. Like, you know, essentially shutting down nuclear programs. Like they're having talks, him and Gorbachev, I think at the time. And because Reagan wouldn't give up the Star Wars plan, which wasn't a real plan, and it was only just sort of like this fantasy thing. Supposedly because he wouldn't give that up, like those talks died, like in Iceland, and so it's like it's constantly over and over again, sort of proving that that the events that were sort of seemed like the world was heading toward an arrival, before she figured it out with the sat phone and whispering the general's wife's dying words.
We were going to start intergalactic war.
Exactly. Everyone, turns off the we're not talking to each other. It's like that seems to be happening over and over again. Sort of like
that scene cracked me up. She's like trying to talk and was disconnected. I'm like, that's our Zoom call? That's how we're going to fucking handle this? We can't get along for 2 weeks? Come on.
No, absolutely not.
Damn it! We need to be talking to each other.
You want to talk to them? Find out what this means.
All right, well, next week we will be discussing, this is another cool subject, of sequels that retcon other sequels in the series. I think I said that perfectly, actually. So these are movies that...
But let's unpack it a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so these would be movies that happen, one or two, I would say 2 or 3 sequels in the
franchise.
In the franchise, exactly, that completely ignore some of the previous episodes. I think we've got a great block here.
Right. So like it takes like, we have a hit movie and then the franchise takes off in a certain trajectory. And then at a certain point they decide, you know what? We're not doing that anymore. We're going to take it this other direction. Forget those other movies. Forget them. And then
it's so easy to do, right?
Yeah. This is the sequel. This one right here. Exactly.
And I think that these are perfect examples of that. Well, maybe one of them I'm not too sure of because I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But we are talking about Exorcist 3 from 1990, which ignores Part 2, which is
The Heretic.
Exorcist 2, the Heretic, which was awful. Halloween 2018. This is the one that Danny McBride produced with David Gordon Green directing. So this one ignores everything from 2 on up to that
13 movies or whatever it was in between.
Yeah, whatever it was. Except the Busta Rhymes one. I think that one stays in there.
Was that Halloween Water or which one was that?
No, that was the one right after.
Okay.
That was Resurrection.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last one we're talking about is Terminator Dark Fate from 2019, which apparently completely retcons 3, 4, 5 out of the Terminator franchise.
So it goes from Terminator 2 to Terminator 2019 or whatever the name of it. What was the subtitle of this one?
Terminator Dark Fate. So Dark Fate is technically Terminator 3 in this instance.
Right.
And Exorcist 3 would be Exorcist 2, and Halloween 2018 would be Halloween 2. I guess that's the best way to put this, right? Yeah.
No, but it'll be a fun little subject. It's like, this thing that happens, perhaps after the franchise slips off the rails, like we talked about with Johnny Birchtold a few months ago, and they want to like try to put this back on the tracks, and this is an interesting way to do that. So it'll be kind of a fun little subject.
We'll see if they succeed.
Yeah. Perhaps it'll be mixed results. We'll see.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
Now I'm not so sure I believe in beginnings and endings. There are days that define your story beyond your life, like the day they arrived.